Floodwaters continue to rise in Mozambique in the wake of cyclone Idai. It also caused widespread damage in Zimbabwe, affecting some 1.5 million people altogether. The Pope refuses Cardinal Philippe Barbarin's resignation, invoking the presumption of innocence. Barbarin recently got a 6-month suspended sentence for his role in covering up the sexual abuse of minors. And the president of Kazakhstan announces his resignation. Nursultan Nazarbayev led the Central Asian nation for 3 decades. We'll have more from Moscow in a moment. Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Claire Pride. We start with the devastation caused by Cyclone Idai in southeastern Africa. Floodwaters are still rising in Mozambique, submerging large swathes of the country. Many people are stuck on rooftops, with relief efforts hampered by the state of roads. The World Food Programme describing the situation as a major humanitarian emergency. Idai has also affected people in Malawi and Zimbabwe, where the storm has claimed dozens of lives. Mozambique's president says as many as 1,000 people might have been killed. Charlie James has more.
Entire villages submerged, bodies left floating in the floodwaters. Mozambique's president called the damage wrought by Cyclone Idai a disaster of great proportions. The central port city of Beira was directly hit. Its 500,000 residents left without power, communications, or passable roads.
Other years there have been storms, but not like this. This year was the worst ever, washing away homes, away clothes, getting food wet, and leaving us with nothing.
It took days for the scope of the disaster to come into focus. Hindered by the damage, rescue teams couldn't reach some victims for 3 days. Residents are without electricity or running water, prompting a warning from the World Health Organization.
You have, of course, the risks of drowning and victims there, but you also have crush and trauma injuries through the flooding. This is typically followed then later by waterborne diseases. Rise of airborne diseases like malaria could also be expected.
Cyclone Idai hit Mozambique Thursday with winds as high as 177 kilometers per hour. The heavy rains then moved inland to Zimbabwe and Malawi. Dozens died in Zimbabwe as well, and those who survived saw homes swept away and bridges ripped to pieces.
I still have not found where my daughter is buried in the debris. There is no furniture, no more clothes. There is only rubble and stones.
The storm affected more than 1.5 million people, and for Mozambique, could prove to be the deadliest in generations.
The Pope has refused Cardinal Philippe Barbarin's resignation. He's the French cardinal who about 10 days ago got a 6-month suspended sentence for his role in covering up the sexual abuse of minors. Let's go to Rome now and speak to our correspondent Josephine McKenna. Josephine, if he's serious about addressing the sex abuse scandal, why would the Pope refuse Barbarin's resignation?
Well, according to the statement that was released on the diocese website, the Diocese of Lyon, the Cardinal himself said that the Pope had invoked the concept of presumption of innocence. Now, we know that Cardinal Barbarin is appealing this sentence that he received, and it is consistent with the Pope's policy of trying to be sure that the judicial process has been completed before he pushes for a resignation or indeed moves to defrock any clergy. That seems to be consistent with what the Pope has done in the case of the Australian Cardinal George Pell, who has been tried, convicted and sentenced for sexual abuse in Australia. He is appealing that sentence, and that appeal is due in June. And the Pope has said that he wants to see that judicial process exhausted before he takes any action. So on the website today of the Lyon Diocese, the Cardinal said that at the Pope's suggestion and because of the suffering in the church in Lyon in the past 3 years, he had decided to step aside for a period of time and leave his position, but he hasn't formally resigned.
So he's going to be handing over some day-to-day duties to someone else?
That's right. He will be handing over those duties to the Vicar General in Lyon. It's not clear where he will be in the diocese or whether he will be leaving town altogether. But it is significant that he is appealing the sentence, and so far we haven't seen the full judicial process completed. And I think that's something that the Pope takes very seriously, as I said before, and he certainly believes that justice should be done before he steps in, and that seems to be consistent with the messages he gave to the world and to bishops and other clergy who gathered at the Vatican recently for the special conference on sex abuse that was held here in February.
Thank you very much, Josephine McKenna in Rome for us. In other news, the president of Kazakhstan has announced his resignation in a televised address. Nursultan Nazarbayev led the Central Asian nation for 3 decades. Joining me from Moscow, our correspondent Nick Holdsworth. Nick, how much of a surprise was this announcement?
Well, this came like a bolt out of the blue. The Russian Federation Council Speaker, that's the upper house of the Russian House of Parliament, was completely taken by surprise. Russia, which is a key ally of Kazakhstan, had no notice of this whatsoever. Nursultan Nazarbayev, who's actually been head of Kazakhstan for about 30 years, he was head of the Soviet Republic for the last couple of years of its existence before he became president of Kazakhstan, went on state TV in Kazakhstan at 7 o'clock local time in the evening and made his announcement saying that he was stepping down. He will stay on as the Secretary of the National Security Council. But basically, he's stepping out of the pitch. He didn't actually give any reasons for it, although he is 78 years old and has been in charge for 30 years.
Who's going to be taking over, Nick?
Well, according to Kazakhstan's constitution, the upper house of Parliament, the Speaker of the upper house of Parliament, acts as head of state until a new president is elected. So at the moment, we don't know. There is a caretaker who's looking after things at the moment, who's a key ally of Nazarbayev, and that is the Speaker of the upper house, Kasim Yomart Tokayev. Nazarbayev will also remain head of the ruling party, Nur Otan, and as I already mentioned, will continue to chair the National Security Council.
All right, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date. Nick Holdsworth in Moscow. To Algeria now, where thousands of people have taken to the streets of the capital Algiers, calling for President Abdelaziz Bouteflika to step down. This a day after the Deputy Prime Minister, on a visit to Russia, defended the government's response to weeks of largely peaceful protests, which includes delaying next month's election and holding a national conference. Bouteflika says he'll only go once there's a new constitution. Selina Sykes reports.
Marching for change on a symbolic day. Abdelaziz Bouteflika may have dropped his bid for a 5th term last week. But that's not enough for these protesters. Out again on the streets of Algiers to call for the ailing president's immediate resignation on the anniversary of the ceasefire that ended the Algerian war.
I've come to push for laws to be changed in this country. I hope the situation will improve. I am with the people.
As Algerian citizens, we support this popular movement. And as doctors, we've come out to protest with the Algerian people. And we will continue to protest to show the elite that we are against those in power.
Thousands of students, university professors and health workers gathered in the Algerian capital on Tuesday as protest leaders issued their first direct message to the army, urging it not to interfere in politics. Bouteflika's apparent concessions last week have done little to appease protests. Algeria's newly appointed deputy prime minister said the 82-year-old will hand over his power to an elected president. But when exactly is unclear. The upcoming mid-April elections were scrapped last week. And in a statement on Monday, Bouteflika said he would not step down until a new constitution and a series of reforms were in place.
That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.